The subject line was only 3 words. Let's be adults. I remember staring at it, my hands still dusty from patrol, my boots leaving little dunes of sand across the concrete floor. It was late. The barracks were quiet except for the hum of an old fan. I thought maybe it was an update from my husband, an argument smoothed over, or one of his half-hearted be safe notes. But when I clicked it open, I felt my chest tighten. The message itself was 3 sentences long. I've filed for divorce. I've emptied our joint account. I've moved Claire in. Claire, my neighbor, my so-called friend, the woman who once borrowed sugar from me, who waved across the fence in summer, who offered to water my plants when I traveled. Claire. I read it once, twice. The words didn't change. Divorce. Emptied. Moved. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to the communal showers. My body was on autopilot. Water, soap, towel, uniform. But my head was buzzing like I'd swallowed bees. My name wasn't even in the message. No Linda, no honey, no I'm sorry. Just a typed legal update, as cold as a receipt. When I got back to my bunk, my roommate glanced at me. You good? She asked, not looking up from the deck of cards in her hands. I swallowed. Some stuff back home. She nodded. In the military, we learn to read silence. We also learn when not to press. I opened the laptop again. The email was still there, glowing. I thought about writing a novel of anger, screaming in capital letters, demanding explanations he'd never give. But instead, I typed 1 word. Understood. I hit send. Not because I understood, not because I accepted it, but because I wanted him to believe I'd gone quiet. That I'd rolled over, broken, like he expected. Men like him, arrogant, smug, they mistake silence for defeat. But silence, when you know how to use it, is strategy. I lay down on the cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant buzz of generators. In my head, I replayed the last year, the missed calls, the new passwords, the way he stopped asking about my day, the late nights he claimed were work, his dismissive little laughs when I asked about bills. And then there was Claire, always around, always helpful. Too helpful, I should have known. My gut had whispered it before I deployed. He's slipping. Something's wrong. But I wanted to believe in 20 years of marriage, in vows spoken before God, in the house we built together. I wanted to believe that when I laced up my boots for deployment, my home would still be there when I came back. Instead, he handed my life over in 3 sentences. I thought about our joint account, about the money I'd saved from hazard pay, about the cushion I'd built for our retirement, about the college fund for the grandkids we always said we'd help with. Gone. All of it. I thought about my kitchen. Was Claire standing in it now, wearing my apron, stirring a pot with the spoon Robert bought me on our first anniversary trip? Was she laughing at the same table where I taught our daughter to read? I closed my eyes. I didn't feel sadness. Not really. Not yet. I felt something colder, sharper, like glass settling into place. Because what he didn't know, what Claire didn't know, was that before I left, I'd made quiet moves of my own. I wasn't blind, and I wasn't stupid. Important papers, tucked away. A few valuables stored. A separate account, opened quietly in my name. And I had one thing they didn't: patience. So I let the email sit there. I let the words press against my ribs like a bruise. And I whispered to myself, paper beats noise. Because if they thought one email could erase me, they'd forgotten who taught this family how to write. What I planned next wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be messy. It wouldn't even be angry. It would be precise, legal, permanent. I adjusted my pillow, looked at the green light blinking on the Wi-Fi router, and smiled. The trap had already started. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. I didn't sleep much that night. The cot was hard, the air hot, but it wasn't the sand or the heat that kept me awake. It was the voice in my head. His voice, reading that email like it was an afterthought. I've filed for divorce. I've emptied our joint account. I've moved Claire in. I whispered those lines to myself, over and over, until the syllables stopped sounding like English. But here's the thing. Betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere. Not really. When I let my mind wander back, the red flags were already waving. 6 months before deployment, he stopped asking about my day. A habit, gone. He'd sit in his chair scrolling on his phone, screen tilted away. I'd talk about training schedules, about retirement plans, about bills. He'd grunt, maybe nod. Sometimes not even that. Then there were the passwords. He changed the one on our laptop, claimed it was for security. He changed his phone lock, too. When I asked, he laughed. "Linda, you don't need to worry about that. You wouldn't understand all the tech stuff anyway." That line, "you wouldn't understand," is poison. I didn't press him. That's not my style. I've never been one to snoop, never been the type to scroll through messages at midnight or follow someone in the car. That's not dignity. That's not me. But I wasn't blind either. So I made quiet moves of my own. First, I secured important documents: birth certificate, marriage license, the deed to our house. I placed them in a fireproof folder and tucked them into a storage unit across town. Only I had the key. Second, I moved a few heirlooms: my grandmother's necklace, my father's watch, the quilt my mother stitched before she passed. Small things, but priceless. I packed them into a box labeled Christmas decor and slid it into the back of the same storage unit. Finally, I opened a separate bank account. Nothing dramatic, just a sliver of my paycheck, redirected quietly. Not enough for him to notice, but enough that I wouldn't be starting from zero if things went south. Did I know then that he'd betray me this completely? No, but my gut whispered. And in life, especially in the service, you learn to trust your gut. The night before deployment, he drove me to the airport. He didn't even get out of the car. I hugged him through the window. "Stay safe," he said, his voice flat. His eyes were dry. It was like he was dropping off a coworker, not a wife of 2 decades heading into another year overseas. That should have told me everything. When I clicked open that email months later, it didn't shock me the way people might think. It stung, yes. It hollowed me out. But it didn't shock me, because deep down, I had already been preparing. The next morning, while my unit filed into the mess hall, I sat down with my tray of powdered eggs and rubber toast. My hand shook as I pulled up our joint account on my phone. The screen lit up with numbers, or rather, with the lack of them. Balance, $14.37, $14.37. That's all that was left from 20 years of paychecks, savings, careful planning. Gone. A notification flashed at the top of the screen. Withdrawal $80,500 to external account. I tapped, scrolled again. There were dozens of transfers. Small ones at first. $500 here, one $200 there. Then bigger. $5,000, $15,000. The day after I left for deployment, he'd started draining it like a sink. I set my fork down. I didn't taste the food anyway. Across the table, one of the younger women in my unit raised an eyebrow. "Bad news?" I forced a smile. "Just account stuff." She nodded, went back to eating. Military folks know when to leave things alone. But inside, I was a storm. He hadn't just left me. He'd left me broke, and he hadn't done it alone. Claire was there, in my house, likely sipping coffee from my favorite mug, stroking my dog like she'd earned him. That night, I sat in the comms room after everyone else left. I pulled up the login for our home security cameras. He probably thought I'd forgotten. He probably assumed I couldn't access it overseas. He was wrong. The feed loaded slowly. First the front yard, then the living room, then the kitchen. And there they were. Claire, barefoot, wearing my robe. My robe. Laughing as she stirred a pot on the stove. My husband leaned against the counter, smiling. He picked up my dog, our dog, and said, "He's finally ours now." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't smash the laptop. I just stared. Then I clicked record. I logged out, sat in the hallway, and let the hum of the fluorescent lights wash over me. When my bunkmate passed, she glanced at me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I looked up slowly. "Not a ghost," I said. "A betrayal." She opened her mouth to ask more, but I shook my head. "I don't start fights," I whispered. "But I finish them." 2 weeks after that email, I was sitting in the mess hall again when my phone buzzed. A new notification. Withdrawal. $12,000. I didn't even open the app right away. I just stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Another chunk gone. Another slice of the life I'd built, stolen in daylight. By then, my balance was basically zero. Retirement funds, savings, the nest egg we'd built for decades. It had all been funneled into an account I didn't recognize. I pushed my tray away. My stomach was empty, but I couldn't eat. Around me, laughter echoed, soldiers swapping jokes, FaceTiming their kids, talking about home repairs. Normal life carried on while mine was burning down. Later that night, my bunkmate found me sitting in the hallway, staring at nothing. "You look haunted," she said softly. I glanced up. "My husband emptied everything," I whispered. "Every dollar. Moved another woman into my house, and now he's pretending like I never existed." She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't offer cliches. She just asked, "What's your plan?" And those 3 words, snapped something inside me into place. I didn't have a plan. Not yet. But I needed one. So I sent an email to the only person I trusted outside the service, my old friend Sarah. We'd gone to nursing school together before life took us down different paths. She married a lawyer, a good one. My subject line was just 2 words, "Need help." She replied within the hour, "Call us. Secure line. Tonight." I walked across base to the phone center, palms sweaty, heart pounding. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I dialed the number Sarah had sent and waited. A man's voice answered, calm, steady. "Linda, this is Mark. Sarah filled me in. Tell me everything." So I did. About the email, the drained accounts, the camera footage, Claire in my robe stirring a pot in my kitchen, my husband smiling like a man who'd won. Mark listened without interrupting. Then he asked, "Have you checked the deed? Any refinance applications?" I blinked. "No? Why?" "Because when people drain accounts, they usually go for bigger bites. Equity, mortgages, loans, especially if your name's on the house." My stomach twisted. "My name is on the house. Only mine. VA loan." He exhaled. "Then he can't legally touch it. Not without your signature. But if he forged it..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. That night, I logged into the county's online records. My hands shook as I typed our address into the search bar. A file popped up. Refinance application. Dated 2 months earlier. I clicked it open. And there it was. My name. My supposed signature. Except it wasn't mine. The middle initial was wrong. My real middle name is Kay. On the document, it was typed as Lee. The strokes of the letters were shaky, inconsistent. The loop in the D didn't match how I've written it my entire life. Someone had tried to copy my handwriting, but they'd failed. Miserably. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My husband hadn't just betrayed me. He'd committed fraud. I printed the document and held it in my hands, the ink still warm. My heart hammered, But not from fear, from clarity. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was a crime, and crimes leave trails. The next day, I called Mark again. "You were right," I told him. "They forged my signature." He didn't sound surprised. "Send it to me, now." I scanned and emailed it. Minutes later, my phone rang again. "This is forgery," he said firmly. "And since it involves a VA-backed loan, it could escalate to federal fraud. This is bigger than just a messy divorce, Linda. This is a case." I closed my eyes. A weight I didn't know I'd been carrying lifted off my chest. For the first time since that email, I felt something like control. "What do I do next?" I asked. "You do nothing," Mark said. "Not yet. Keep gathering. Keep recording. Every word, every withdrawal, every login. We'll build the case piece by piece. Let them keep digging their own hole. And when they're done, we'll be standing at the edge with a rope." I smiled for the first time in weeks. A thin, sharp smile. That night, I logged back into the cameras. Claire was there again, this time hosting a dinner. My husband sat at the head of the table, the seat that used to be mine, while Claire poured wine into glasses I'd bought with my first paycheck. One of their friends laughed. "So, when do you sell this place?" My husband grinned. "Already in process. Paperwork's almost done." I pressed record. My finger didn't shake. The next morning, I labeled the file. Kitchen Dinner, Proof, MP4. Piece by piece, their arrogance was turning into evidence. And piece by piece, my silence was becoming the loudest weapon I had. 2 months after that email, my deployment wrapped earlier than expected. Logistics, rotation, the kind of thing the higher-ups shuffle like a deck of cards. Most of my unit cheered. Me? I just felt the weight of my next mission settling on my shoulders. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home. Not my husband. Not my daughter. Not even the neighbors. Silence was my best weapon, and I wasn't about to ruin it with a dramatic entrance. When the plane touched down, I didn't go straight home. I didn't even drive by. I took a cab from the airport to a modest motel 2 towns over. Paid cash. Checked in under my middle name, Kay. The room was nothing fancy. A bed, a desk, a view of a parking lot. But it was safe. Anonymous. Exactly what I needed. That night, I sat on the thin mattress and laid out everything I'd brought with me. The printed refinance document with the forged signature. The bank statements showing the withdrawals. The USB stick with video files from my security cameras. Proof, stacked like ammo. Then I called Mark. "I'm back," I said. "Good," he replied. "Now we move to Phase 2. Phase 2 was simple in theory, brutal in practice. Freeze everything they thought they controlled. The next morning, I walked into the county clerk's office with my ID, my deed, and the forged refinance document. The clerk, a woman about my age with tired eyes and a neat bun, looked at me over her glasses as I laid the papers on her desk. "They forged my signature," I said calmly. "On a VA-backed loan, without my consent." She frowned, scanned the pages, and then her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is serious." "I know." Within an hour, a hold was placed on my property. No sales, no transfers, no funny business. Not without my physical presence. The paper was stamped, signed, and sealed. Just like that, their little scheme hit a wall they didn't even know existed. Next stop was the bank. The loan officer who had processed the refinance looked pale when I slid my ID and the forged signature across his desk. "This isn't me," I said evenly. "Look at the loop on the D. Look at the middle initial. Wrong name, wrong hand." He compared the documents, his face growing paler by the second. "Mrs. Walker, I don't know how this got approved." "I do," I said. "Sloppy fraud. Fix it." He swallowed hard. "I'll need to escalate this immediately." "Do that," I replied, gathering the pages. "And while you're at it, flag every account linked to his name. You'll find patterns, transfers, maybe even other victims. By the time I walked out of the bank, I wasn't just a wife who'd been betrayed. I was a plaintiff, a whistleblower, a problem my husband couldn't laugh away. That evening, back in my motel room, I logged into the security cameras again. The feed loaded slowly, but when it cleared, I saw Claire in my living room, vacuuming the rug like she owned it. My husband sat on the couch, feet propped on the coffee table I'd refinished with my own hands. He was on the phone, chuckling. "Yeah, paperwork's done," he said. "We'll close soon. Easy money. She won't know a thing." I pressed record. Later, I labeled the file. Living room call easymoney.mp4. Piece by piece, their arrogance kept feeding my case. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed a climax. A moment where they'd expose themselves so clearly, so undeniably, that even the slickest lawyer couldn't twist it. That's when Mark suggested the sting. "Stage a walkthrough," he said. "A buyer, an inspection, something that will make them brag. They'll talk about fast closes, skipping inspections, how you won't resist. We'll have it all on tape." "And you'll be nearby?" I asked. "Closer than you think." The plan made my stomach twist, but not from fear, from anticipation. The day before the sting, I drove past my house for the first time since I'd returned. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles whitened. The yard was trimmed, the curtains drawn, a strange car in the driveway. My car was gone, of course, sold probably, or repurposed. I parked down the street just out of sight and watched. Through the window I saw them. Claire, fluffing pillows. My husband, pacing with papers in his hand. He gestured like a man selling a dream. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt the sting of grief. That was my home. My blood, sweat, and tears. The walls I painted, the garden I planted, the roof I fixed after the last storm. And now they were parading through it like I was already dead. But grief is a luxury, and I didn't come this far for tears. The next morning, I met with Mark and his colleagues in a small diner 10 miles from town. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the forged refinance, my bank records, and stills from the camera footage. "Everything we need," he said. "Now we just need them to perform." "They'll perform," I replied, sipping my coffee. "They love an audience." The sting was set for Wednesday. A buyer would arrive at the house posing as an interested party. My husband and Claire would brag, the realtor would gush, and all of it would be caught on hidden cameras and mics. My job? Be there. Silent. Watching. Serving tea like nothing was wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the motel window, staring out at the neon sign blinking over the parking lot. My reflection stared back, lines deeper, hair streaked silver, but eyes sharper than ever. "They called me confused," I whispered. "Let's see who looks confused when the badges come out." The next morning I dressed carefully. A simple blouse, slacks, red lipstick, the kind Robert used to say made me look stubborn. I packed my recorder, my documents, and my calmest smile. It was time. Wednesday arrived with the kind of bright, brittle sunshine that makes everything look honest. It was a good day for truth. I parked 2 streets over and walked the long way, past the maple someone had trimmed badly and the neighbor's mailbox with peeling numbers. The air smelled like cut grass and wet concrete. When I reached my front walk, I paused, set my shoulders, and rang my own doorbell. Claire opened the door wearing my pearl earrings. "Linda," she sang, surprised but trying not to show it. "We weren't expecting you." "That's why I came," I said, breezing past her into my foyer. "I brought tea." From the living room, my husband's voice. "Tea? We don't have time for—" He rounded the corner and stopped. His eyes flicked to the canvas tote on my shoulder, then to my face. "You're back." "For a visit," I said, moving toward the kitchen. "I'll be out of your hair soon." He tried on a smile. We're showing the house today. You should probably not be here? You've been saying that for months, I answered, and clicked the kettle on. The realtor arrived first, all breathless cologne and polished shoes. Good morning, he boomed. We'll do a quick lap for staging notes and then the buyer arrives. Cash offer. We'll push a quick close. No need to spook the situation. The situation pours a very steady cup of Earl Grey, I said, sliding teacups to the far side of the island. Help yourselves. He didn't. He and my husband drifted to the living room, pointing out features. Claire followed, rearranging a throw she'd never bought. I set a tiny digital recorder between the sugar and the honey. It blinked once and went still. At 10:07, the buyer knocked. A man in a navy blazer stepped in, exactly the kind of neutral that never belongs anywhere and therefore fits everywhere. He shook hands, offered bland compliments, and took out a small notebook like a man tallying numbers on a grocery list. Behind him, 2 more visitors slipped in. Friends, he said. They hovered by the door, murmuring to each other, nodding in that polite, forgettable way that good watchers are trained to do. Shall we? The realtor said. He made a show of sweeping his arm toward the living room. Sun-filled. Good bones. Original hardwoods. We've updated the plumbing, my husband lied smoothly, and the roof 2 years ago. He gestured toward Claire as if she were an upgrade. We've done a lot. We, I echoed lightly, stirring honey into a cup. They didn't hear me. The buyer asked about timeline. The realtor said, We list at $470, but our guy is prepared to go $420 cash. No inspection. We'll keep it simple. She, and here he tipped his chin toward me, has a lot on her plate. We'll help her sign what's needed. The man in the navy blazer made a thoughtful noise. And title? Already in motion, the realtor said. We have mail forwarding paperwork and a couple authorizations. He smiled like a cat. We'll present them as utilities to ease the transition. The buyer said, as if tasting soup. I poured the first cup of tea and set it in front of him. Careful, I said. It's hot. He didn't drink. Neither did the 2 by the door. Walk me through your ideal close, the buyer said, pen poised, and the seller's state of mind. My husband chuckled. She's sentimental. Confused, Claire corrected breezily, flipping a page of the realtor's folder. Big house, lots of memories. She needs help with decisions. Yes, the realtor said quickly. She trusts family. If we keep forms simple, she signs. I reached for the recorder and pretended to adjust the honey jar. The device's tiny memory light blinked once. Good girl. Let's see the bedrooms, the buyer said. They paraded down the hallway, the realtor narrating like a tour guide. I followed at a distance, not touching the door frames that my husband and I had painted together, not looking too long at the indentation in the carpet where Robert's reading chair used to sit. In the master, the buyer ran a calculating gaze over the closet. In the guest room, he rapped his knuckles on the window trim. The friends near the door drifted in, murmuring again. One of them paused to look directly at me and, in the tiniest movement, a twitch of a finger at his cuff, let me know he saw the recorder in my pocket. We returned to the kitchen. The realtor arranged his papers. Here, he said, sliding a slim stack toward me. Just a little mail forward and a utilities authorization, to make everything smooth. Of course, I said pleasantly. I like smooth. We all like smooth, don't we? I glanced at the buyer. He nodded, neutral as rain. I uncapped the pen. The room held its breath. Before we do any of that, the buyer said mildly, could I just clarify what I heard earlier? You said you'd list at $470 but expect $420, no inspection, and that the owner— He turned his head, eyes on my husband. Is easily guided. Is that accurate? Extremely, Claire said. She's sweet. But she'll sign. The buyer made another thoughtful sound, then capped his pen. All right, That's what I needed. He looked at the two friends. They straightened. Now, I said softly. They reached into their jackets and showed badges. Federal agents, one said, voice calm as a clock. Nobody move. Silence hit the room like snow, not loud, but total. The realtor's mouth opened and closed. Claire's face drained to the color of unpainted drywall. My husband barked out a sound that wanted to be a laugh and landed as a cough. You've got to be kidding. Not at all, the agent replied. We have recorded statements made in this room and elsewhere regarding forged signatures, deceptive paperwork, and a plan to transfer title by misrepresentation. We're going to ask everyone to place their hands where we can see them and step into the living room. Linda, my husband said, turning to me, teeth bared in what he thought was a smile. What is this? What did you do? I brewed tea, I said. And I didn't sign. Claire found her voice. You can't prove anything. Oh? I reached into my pocket and set the tiny recorder on the island, then tapped my phone. The device chirped and playback flooded the quiet with their own voices. No inspection. Keep forms simple. Present them as utilities. She'll sign. She trusts family. The realtor lunged for the recorder. An agent's hand appeared from nowhere, firm on his forearm. Don't, the agent said gently. You're doing so much better when you don't. Let's talk in the living room, the other agent said. And by talk, I mean we'll advise you of your rights, and you'll decide how much of this you want to explain on the record. My husband's eyes darted to the front window. Outside, Mrs. Keating from 2 doors down was watering her hydrangeas, hose pointed optimistically at nothing, while her gaze sat squarely on our porch. Next to her, Mr. Lang stood with his dog, which had no interest in walking away. A white delivery van idled at the curb. The driver leaned on his steering wheel like he was built into it. An audience, as predicted. They always gathered for weather and for truth. We walked to the living room. The agents asked for IDs. Claire's hand shook so hard her driver's license rattled against the plastic window of her wallet. The realtor had gone slick with sweat. His hair looked suddenly too dark for his face. Sir, one agent said to my husband, you'll want to call counsel. Given the VA-backed loan in the file and the forged signature we've already reviewed, we're beyond a neighborhood dispute. He tried a last oily smile. We're family. This is just a misunderstanding. Family, I said, doesn't sell a woman's house while she's still making tea. The buyer, no longer a buyer, opened a folder. For the record, he said, we have the county record of a refinance application bearing a forged signature, bank statements reflecting transfers to an external account, and multiple recordings made in this residence wherein you, he pointed to my husband, and you, to the realtor, describe a plan to misrepresent documents to obtain title or authorization from an elderly owner? I'm not elderly, I said mildly. I'm exact. Outside, a second unmarked sedan arrived. 2 more agents stepped out. The neighbor's little dog barked once, delighted by the new characters in the show. We're going to separate you, an agent said, nodding to my husband and the realtor. Standard procedure. Wait, Claire blurted, voice high and thin. I didn't know about any forgery. He told me it was a mail change and utilities. I thought... She swallowed. I thought we were helping. Helping yourselves, I said. She looked at me then. Really looked. Past the lipstick, past the calm, past the pearls she'd stolen, to the bone of me. Linda, you borrowed my robe, I said. And my house. That was enough. They took them each to separate rooms. From the hallway came the low murmur of questions and the long, unraveling answers that men give when they realize the floor is farther away than they thought. The realtor asked for water. My husband asked for a second chance. Claire asked if she could call her sister. I stood in my kitchen and poured the tea I had promised. I set 3 cups on the counter. One for the agent who had noticed the recorder, who now nodded thanks without breaking his line of questioning. One for the buyer who was not a buyer, who had listened to sentences like a man picking locks, and one for myself, because a woman should drink tea in her own house. After a while, they brought my husband back to the living room. His jaw worked as if trying to remember how words become sentences. "Linda," he started. "Yes," I said, and I was proud of how easy the word felt. "I made mistakes. I was angry, I was lonely, You were greedy," I said. "You thought I was far away and that made me small." He flinched. Claire stood in the doorway, makeup smudged. "I'll say what I did," she muttered, to no one in particular. "I'll say what he told me to do. I'm not going down for his charm." "Good," an agent said. "We like practical people." "We'll need your statement too, Mrs. Walker," the buyer-turned agent added, turning to me. "And copies of your files." He smiled, a real smile, small and warm. "You're very organized." "I taught school for 31 years, I replied. "Do you know how many permission slips that is?" He chuckled. "Enough to build a case, apparently." They left just before noon. Not in handcuffs, that would come later, after charges and paperwork, but with a heaviness that looked a lot like consequence draped over their shoulders. Outside, Mrs. Keating's hydrangeas were drenched. Mr. Lang's dog had finally sat down. The delivery driver gave me a thumbs up like we were on the same team. When the door closed, the house exhaled. I stood in the center of my living room and listened. Houses have a voice if you know how to hear it. This one hummed like it remembers who bought it, who patched its roof, who scrubbed its floors with lemon oil and patience. I walked to the mantel and straightened the frame that had gone crooked in all the commotion. It was a photo of my granddaughter with a popsicle, red grin bleeding into summer. Next to it, the photo of my husband and me on our 5th anniversary, younger, softer, both of us still certain that vows were the kind of thread that couldn't fray. "Paper beats noise," I said out loud, like a benediction. I made myself a sandwich, ate it standing up in the kitchen the way I used to when I was late for work, and called Mark. "It's done," I told him. "I know," he said. "They're already calling. The bank, the county, the bureau. Your file has a lot of friends." "Good," I said, rinsing my plate. "I have a house to air out." "Expect blowback," he warned gently. "He'll try to call. She might. There will be tears. You don't owe anyone your quiet." "I know what I owe," I said. "I owe fidelity to the truth." He was quiet a beat. "I wish all my clients talked like that." "Retired teacher," I said. "We memorize our lines." I hung up and opened every window in the house. The breeze came in like an apology, lifting the corners of the curtains, laying a soft hand on my shoulders. It carried out the cologne and the hairspray and the realtor's brochures and brought in something better. Cut grass, wet concrete, a neighbor's laundry soap. Around 4, there was a knock. Not timid, not bold, just there. I opened the door to find my daughter on the porch, eyes red, hair unbrushed, the way people look when all their explanations have fallen out of their pockets and smashed on the sidewalk. "Mom," she said, and it was not a roll this time. It was a word with weight. I thought, "I know what you thought," I said, "and I know what you chose." She looked at the floorboards. "I'm sorry." "Good," I said. "Now be useful. Help me move the couch back where it belongs." She blinked, then nodded. We lifted together. It was heavy. We set it down. She looked at me the way children look when they have scraped their knees on the truth. "Are you going to forgive me?" "I'm going to keep the windows open," I said. "The rest will take time." That evening, I made another pot of tea. Silence settled over the house, not empty, but full. I sat at the table with a legal pad and a pen and wrote 3 lists: repairs, replacements, revisions. The first had change locks at the top. The second had new kettle. The third had rewrite will in underlined letters as neat as a teacher's chalkboard. When the sun slid behind the maples, I walked to the porch and watched the light soften the edges of everything. 2 doors down, Mrs. Keating waved her hose like a parade baton. "You gave them what for?" she called. "No," I said. "I gave them paperwork." She laughed, delighted. "Better." Night came. The house breathed with me. Somewhere down the block, a television murmured. A car door closed. A dog barked, and then thought better of it. I went inside and closed the front door. It clicked the way it used to, like a period at the end of a sentence that says, "This is mine." Tomorrow, there would be phone calls and forms and the weary math of restitution. Tomorrow, I would meet with Mark to start the slow, exact work of putting numbers back where trust used to be. Tomorrow, perhaps, my husband would try to stand on my porch and explain the difference between mistake and malice. But tonight, I had my windows open and my house back and the taste of Earl Grey on my tongue, and a recorder on my counter with a file named adults.truth.wave that sang the whole story back to me in their own eager voices. Sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes you just need everyone to listen to themselves. The sting was just the beginning. What followed was slower, heavier, like a stone rolling downhill. 2 days later, the first set of official papers arrived at my motel. Subpoenas, affidavits, preliminary reports. Mark sat across from me at the little desk, flipping through pages with a lawyer's patience. "They've got enough to press charges," he said. "Forgery, fraud, attempted property theft, federal because of the VA loan. He's looking at years, not months." I nodded, sipping stale motel coffee. "And Claire?" He shrugged. "Accessory, if they prove knowledge." "She's already trying to cut a deal from what I hear, saying she was duped, saying he told her it was just housekeeping paperwork." "Housekeeping," I repeated, letting the word curl bitter on my tongue. "Linda," Mark said, leaning forward, "I know this has been brutal, but you've handled yourself brilliantly. You're not just surviving this, you're winning." I set my cup down. "I'm not interested in winning. I'm interested in ending." And end it did. The arrest came the following week. It wasn't dramatic, no sirens, no shouting. Just 2 unmarked cars pulling up to the office where he worked. Agents stepping inside, calm as Sunday. Him walking out in cuffs, suit jacket hanging off one shoulder, his face pale and stiff. The news spread fast. Small towns always hum with gossip, and ours was no exception. By dinner, everyone knew. By breakfast, Mrs. Keating had already accidentally told the cashier at the grocery store. By Sunday service, the pews buzzed with whispers. "Did you hear? Claire too? Poor Linda." Except I wasn't poor, not anymore. I was precise. The realtor folded first. He had the most to lose, the least loyalty. Within days, he was singing like a canary, handing over emails, text messages, meeting notes. His testimony painted a picture that even the blind could see. A scheme, deliberate and greedy. Claire came next. She called me, voice shaking, asking to meet. I declined. She left a voicemail instead. "Linda, I didn't mean for it to go this far. He told me you didn't care, that you were gone, that you'd never come back. I just..." Her breath hitched. "I'm sorry. I'll tell them everything. I swear." I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond either. Some words don't need company. My husband, ex-husband really, was the last to break. He fought it, of course. Claimed misunderstanding. Claimed paperwork mix-ups. Claimed I'd given him verbal permission. But the recordings, the forged signature, the realtor's testimony, Claire's voicemail, they wrapped around him like chains. At the preliminary hearing, he avoided my eyes. Claire wept in the back row, makeup streaking down her cheeks. The realtor sat stiff, flanked by his own lawyer, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When the judge read out the charges, The room buzzed. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, attempted theft of VA-backed property. Each word landed like a hammer. I sat tall in my chair, hands folded in my lap. My blouse was crisp, my lipstick steady. When the judge asked if I had anything to add, I rose. "Your Honor," I said, "I don't want vengeance. I want consequence. For him. For them. For anyone who thinks a woman's silence is the same as her absence. Let the record show. I was never gone. I was preparing." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge gave a small nod. "Duly noted, Mrs. Walker." Outside, reporters swarmed. Microphones, cameras, questions shouted like stones. "How do you feel? What's your message to other military families? Do you think justice will be served?" I looked straight into the lens of the nearest camera. "My message," I said evenly, "is simple. Never underestimate the quiet ones. We're the ones writing everything down." The clip aired on local news that night. By morning, it was on national feeds. Military wife exposes forgery scheme. Veteran spouse catches fraud in her own kitchen. Emails flooded my inbox from women. Winter came quietly that year. The kind of winter where the world looks honest in frost, stripped down to its bones. I spent mornings on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, sipping tea while the breath from my cup mingled with the breath from my lungs. Life had settled. Not back to what it was, because some things don't go back, but into something sturdier, quieter, mine. The house was different now. Not haunted, not violated, just lived in again. My daughter visited more often. She'd bring my granddaughter, who would run through the halls, laughter bouncing off the walls that once echoed betrayal. That sound stitched something back together inside me. One afternoon, my granddaughter stopped mid-run, pressed her hand against the doorframe where the old pencil mark still showed her mother's childhood heights, and asked, "Grandma, who made these lines?" I knelt beside her. "I did. Every year, when your mama grew taller." She grinned. "Can you do mine too?" I fetched the pencil, drew the line, wrote her name and the date. The house belonged again. To us. To the ones who stayed. But the story didn't vanish. People still asked. At church. At the store. Sometimes even strangers who recognized me from the news. "Are you the woman who caught her husband forging papers?" "Yes," I'd answer. And sometimes I'd add, "I'm also the woman who rewrote her will and gave the rest to charity." Because betrayal may be part of my story, but it's not the headline anymore. I started speaking, small groups first, then larger. Community centers, veterans halls, women's clubs. They wanted to hear not just the sting, not just the fraud, but the steps, the foresight, the quiet account, the careful storage of documents, the patience to wait for proof. One woman in the front row, hair white as snow, raised her hand once and asked, "Weren't you afraid?" "Yes," I said simply. "But fear is fuel. It burns clean when you direct it." I didn't waste it shouting. I spent it writing everything down. That line stuck. They began quoting it back to me in letters, in thank you notes, in emails from strangers who had taken my story as permission to be vigilant, not silent. It became my legacy, not the betrayal, the precision. By spring, I had planted new roses in the garden, red ones, stubborn ones, the kind that bloom even after frost. My granddaughter helped, dirt under her fingernails, giggling when worms wriggled. And as I pressed those roots into the earth, I realized something. The house wasn't just restored, it was reborn. And so was I. One evening, I sat at my desk with my rewritten will beside me and added a letter to it. Not a legal one, a personal one. To my daughter, to my granddaughter, to every woman who finds this paper someday. If you ever feel erased, remember, emails vanish, paper stays. If you ever feel silenced, remember, quiet is not weakness. Quiet is preparation. And if anyone ever calls you confused, smile and let them think so. Because while they underestimate you, you are already building the proof. I folded the letter, slid it into the folder with the will, and locked it in the drawer. That was my real revenge. Not the trial, not the conviction, not the gossip that turned my husband into a cautionary tale at backyard barbecues. My real revenge was this: turning humiliation into instruction, betrayal into blueprint, silence into legacy. And when my granddaughter grows tall enough to stand where I stand now, she will know exactly how to fight without ever raising her voice. So let them laugh, let them whisper, let them underestimate, because women like me don't start fights. We finish them.